What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show. Me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Brad Wharton today to talk a bit of Cage Warriors. We had a big Cage Warriors card at the weekend, and we have two coming up next weekend as well. Brad, first thing I must ask you, obviously, you missed the card at the weekend. I know you're dealing with a bit of pneumonia over the last while. How are you getting on? And more importantly, nearly, how devastating was it to miss that card? Because I know we talk an awful lot here about it, and your love for Cage Warriors and what you bring to it. It must have been tough to miss it, was it?
It was pretty rough, Sean. I won't lie. I've been with Cage Warriors for 13 years, and I've missed 4 shows. So yeah, I wasn't particularly happy. The really annoying thing is, one of those shows I've missed previously was also in Rome.
Yeah.
So the first Cage Warriors show in Rome I missed. Dan Strauss was out there. Now Dan's not been able to get to any of the subsequent Cage Warriors Rome shows until this one. So I think he thinks that I'm avoiding him in Italy for some reason, but we're going to try and get a bowl of pasta in together in Rome over the next few months. Going to be another big Cage Warriors Rome card announced soon, so keep eyes open for that. And yeah, hopefully I should be fully functioning and there eating my nice bowl of spaghetti pre-fight.
Are you back? Are you back this weekend? You are.
I am. Yeah, I'm going to with something nice and easy like 2 back-to-back fight cards. But look, I've got a bag full of steroids. I've got a bag full of antibiotics. I've got the most disgusting cough medicine you've ever tasted. I'm going to bang the lot of it and see how it goes down.
Well, what would MMA be without a bag full of steroids? Usually maybe on the other side of the cage. Anyway, that might be another chat for another day. Before we get into next week's card, let's look back at the weekend, because it was one of those cards where it was really lining up nicely for the top 2 fights, and then the coming, we'll talk about that in a second, but the main event again, what a fight that was for 2.5 rounds, and then the eye poke from Doom. Liam Gittins with the no contest retains his title against Giordano, but it was lining up nice. I think Gittins was doing very well, and he was probably getting the better of it through 2.5 rounds, but that fight was by no means over. Very unfortunate the way it ended again, wasn't it, Brad? We've seen a lot of it in MMA recently.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, no one wants to see a fight end like that. Those guys are both game as you like. And I think we were only going to have, more of the same as long as it lasted. What I would say is Gittins looked to be drowning him by halfway through that round. The output on his side was just insane. Like, the body shots that started coming out, the elbows, the knees. I think if it had gone on for another round, Gittins was looking like he was going to stop him, but who knows? We've seen Giordano in firefights before. He only needs one big shot or to jump on that guillotine to pull it out the fire. I think, Gittins has quite rightly said it feels like a win, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see them run that back in England at some point over the summer.
Yeah, it's interesting because I suppose there's so many lads at that weight class as well, not just in Cage Warriors, but outside as well, that I suppose Giordano might be lucky to get the rematch, let's put it that way, but it wasn't his fault at the end of the day. I don't think it was necessarily Gittins' fault either. It was one of those that myself and Ian were talking on the podcast at the weekend. It was very unfortunate, it wasn't as egregious as some we've seen lately, so I suppose we'll see that back again. And in the middleweight title fight, Dario Belandi against Naglis Kanaskauskas, the rematch, and it was a lot. The last one was close as well, but this one was even closer. I was watching it and I wasn't really scoring it, to be honest, because I'll be honest, I thought Belandi was going to win. I was like, I'll just kind of watch it, but I need to go back and watch it with a fine tooth comb again. But my thoughts afterwards, when the decision was going to be read, was that Kanaskauskas was going to actually take it, because I thought he did very, very well. I know Belandi came on and maybe the last 3 rounds did very well, but you could argue one of them went to Naglis as well. What did you think of that? And also, how is it watching a fight like this at home when you're usually the arcade side watching it? What's the difference for you watching these at home?
It's weird, man. Like, I was having to resist the temptation to text Dan Strauss things that I wanted to say. Probably would have put him off a little bit. So say this, ask him this, ask Paul this. No, it was good. I enjoyed it. Very much like you. I wasn't scoring it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy these. I'm going to watch as a fan. I'm going to take that opportunity. And I kind of didn't really have a massive lean one way or another. I thought Belandi had done it, but it was one of those where I could easily see it going the other way. If you look at the bigger moments, they probably went to Naglis. He had that big knockdown. He landed some good shots. But obviously, we're scoring round by round. And there were some close ones there. So I very much like you, Sean, I'm going to have to watch it back myself when I've got a bit of time, and I am looking forward to watching it back. And I think Dan and Paul on commentary as well said the exact same thing. Like they really wanted to go and sit down and have another look at this one before coming out with anything definitive. But look, when it's that close in MMA, I don't think you can be that aggrieved either way. We saw that with another fight on the card, Pajani and Delise earlier on, which was another absolute war that was super close, split decision. And obviously one side of that not particularly happy. But again, I thought the right man won that, and I probably wouldn't have been too mad if it had gone the other way there either.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the Belandi fight, it's a little bit like Gaethje and Fiziev at the weekend. It was so close again, and they fought twice, but now the same person has won both of the fights. You'd almost like a trilogy, but I suppose you can't really do it when the same guys won. It'd be a bit unfair on him. But yeah, I think like the undercard, the Pajani losing, and I suppose Hazan less so, but there's a few shocks there from lads. Hazan obviously got right to the top of cage warriors, and Pajani, look at the way he's performed over the last few fights. But like, I would say he's one of the top guys in cage warriors, and what is he coming off 2 losses now in a row? It's very, very surprising. I actually missed that fight at the weekend for some reason. I don't know, it was at the Will Fleury fight was on or something, and I only saw it yesterday, and I was like, oh, he lost. I couldn't believe it like that he lost. But Konstantinos is a very good fighter as well. I remember one of our previous previews, we made note of talking about him because he is very, very, very much a legit guy. So, maybe
we got to sort this weight issue out, though.
Yeah.
Got to sort this weight issue. It's the second time it's happened now. And, with all due respect to him, 8 pounds, unless there's something serious gone on there, which obviously, they weren't forthcoming about, that's tough. And it's harsh on Pajani there because he's got 2 options there. Option 1 is fight a guy in a weight class heavier than you, who is a banger. Option 2 is you let all your fans down, you put that training camp to waste. And you know what MMA fans are like, right? They're going to be like, oh, why it's 8 pounds? Why do you? But that's his career, If Delise had made weight, is it a different outcome? Well, we don't know. So an unfortunate situation there. But look, if Konstantinos can sort that weight issue out, the man's a danger. I think he's probably too small for welterweight. He's probably a bit of a tweener, but lightweight is where he belongs. If you can sort it out, you'd love to see him against a James Power or a George Hardwick.
I wonder if you run it back again, considering it was, as you said, a close split decision, and the fact that he missed weight. Maybe Pajani deserves to get another shot at it. Maybe that's the way to go to. But like, that's tough to ask Pajani to take that fight. Then again, I suppose, what if he misses weight again? But like, what I don't know. It's tough to avoid that. But look, I still hold a lot of hope for Pajani. I really think he is a really, really top guy. One last thing I wanted to mention from that card, obviously Adam Shelley, bit of Irish bias here. He got a win. Good win over Simone Patrizzi, who's a good prospect himself as well. And, the Shelley brothers have had it tough over the last while, losing a couple of fights. And, KF in cage warriors, I suppose, have had it tough. They've had great results maybe outside, but great win for Adam Shelley as well. And, after a tough enough first round, or first part of the first round anyway, he came back and did very, very well in the second and third. So a great card in Rome, a busy weekend for European MMA. I think it's very, very interesting at the moment. I did a podcast last week at it, but like yourselves in Cage Warriors and Octagon and KSW all running shows, and I don't think it'll be the first time the last time there will be a meeting of the trio, or 2 of the trio anyway, over the next while. So the battle for Europe is on. This weekend, Brad, I suppose there's a bit of an elephant in the room. We'll hit in it first. George Hardwick. What's the update in George Hardwick as we speak? Obviously, we're a few days out from it now, but what is the update with George's fight?
So as we're recording this now, Lucas Clay is unfortunately out of the fight. That's something that Cage Warriors were notified about. I believe it was yesterday, perhaps Saturday night. I'm not entirely sure of the timelines off the top of my head. But yeah, Lucas Clay unfortunately out. Obviously, fans might remember they were supposed to fight a year ago. A similar thing happened, and an injury paid to it. So I know George was really looking forward to getting this one over and done with. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. As things stand right now, Cage Warriors trying to rematch George Hardwick, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, the fight's on Friday. To fly someone in from the States or South America, you really need them there by Monday. We've got medicals to do as well. Cage Warriors have the most stringent MMA medicals in Europe, the full whack safe MMA. So you need in brain scans, you need in eye scans. So getting someone in from somewhere else in the world, getting all that done practically, it's difficult. Then you've got to find a lunatic who's going to fight George Hardwick on 4 days' notice. They're out there. They're definitely out there, but, easier said than done. Obviously, Cage Warriors have a show in London the week after. So I believe a sort of tentative plan is if nothing can come good for George this week, he possibly might fight in London. Not entirely sure on that yet, but, we know Ian Dean's got a big bag of tricks, and we know Cage Warriors has got a busy schedule coming up. So I'm sure we'll see George back in the cage, whether it's Friday, whether it's next Friday, or whether it's in a few weeks' time.
I'd say the Irish fans are probably like, leave him off. There's another card coming up in a month or so. We'll put him on that one. But that's unfortunate, isn't it, really? Because looking back at the record there, and the Dana White Contender Series fight was such, I suppose, a blow for him, and then he was out for so long afterwards, and missed opportunities and stuff with other fights falling through, and it was a year out of the cage, and now he's coming back, and it's what is it, 6 or 7 months since that last fight was September 2024. Again, it's a bit of time out for a guy who has been so active, before that, having 3 and 4 fights in a year before, and to lose out in a fight again. Now, as we said, let's hope it happens this weekend, but let's hope it happens next weekend for George. But look, I think when he went into that Contender Series fight, everyone was expecting him to win, and maybe that, maybe a bit of that, seeped into him. Who knows? Now, it's tough to say, but if it did, I don't think it'll ever happen again, type of thing. But he needs a few fights to get back there, like lads have done previously. On George himself, like, can you with the last fight and with the preparation for this fight, can you see that in him, that like he's a new lease on life, that like, I not only have to go in there, defend the title, fight these tough guys, I have to kind of build my road back and climb that mountain to get to the UFC opportunity again?
Yeah, look, I mean, anyone who's seen George fight knows George. They know he's a UFC level guy, and they know there are guys in the UFC he could beat quite handily. I don't think that's in question. Everyone has a bad night at the office, and unfortunately for George, he had his on the Contender Series, and the injuries and things like that have come afterwards. It's part of the game. How many times have we seen guys just have a terrible run of opponents falling out? I mean, Teddy Stringer, who we'll talk about in a few moments' time, I'm sure. He's barely had a fight in the last 2 years that's not been a late notice for opponent, or he's had to be removed from fight cards because opponents have ended up pulling out on the day with injuries and whatnot. It's just a frustrating part of the game. And, for George, he's had a couple of these bits of bad luck stack up one on top of the other now. And it just magnifies the whole situation. But look, we could see him in there Friday. We could see him in there next week. He gets another trademark Hardwick performance under his belt. And there's no reason why, he doesn't get a call up to the Contender Series, or he doesn't get a call up to the UFC. He's on their radar. Obviously, his brother's on the radar too. The UFC love a pair of brothers fighting. It's something that they've always been quite interested in. So I think the opportunity to have George and Harry in the UFC, maybe on the same card at some point in the future, is something that I'm certainly predicting.
100%. It'd be interesting if both of them won the Contender Series, actually. I don't know if that's something we've seen before. That'd be really, really cool. But yeah, as you said, like, I always thought, George would be perfect for tough. Or Harry even, now you mentioned, like, that personality, I think, like, putting someone in the house with extra training, I suppose, for a good few weeks, I think it'd benefit lads like them an awful lot, because they're so good now, that extra bit. But like, tough is maybe not what it used to be as well. But I don't know, maybe for certain guys I do think it works out. For others I think it's probably not the path. But I think they'd, I mean,
I'd tune in for the first time in 15 years or whatever it's been if the Hardwicks were on it. It's certainly made me want to watch it. No, look, tough certainly has its place. There's certainly people watching it still. And I think, look, those guys need their own sitcom or something. Like, they need to be on TV regularly, and if tough's the way forward, then I'm all for it.
I could just imagine what that sitcom would be like, but maybe that's chat for another day. I suppose the other big star this weekend for Cage Warriors is Luke Riley. He's taking on Tariel Abasov, and for Luke, he has done, I suppose, the opposite of what we were saying there, and not to, not that it's Teddy Stringer or George Hardwick's fault or anything like that, but Luke has been very, very busy over the last few years. Like, he had 3 fights in 2023, 3 fights in 2022. He only made his debut in 2021, and he's had 2 fights last year as well. I suppose it's been a bit of time out of the cage now, but like, I suppose the scene always starts off a bit slowly in the new year, so he's back in as quickly as possible. 10-0 for Luke. When you hit that and you've 7 knockouts and you come from the gym he's with, are you surprised you're going to be calling another Luke Riley fight this weekend? Like, I imagine the last time you called one, you probably thought it'd be the last time, did you?
Yeah, I think so. I think Luke's come out and said publicly that there was something to do with the visa issue that stopped him. It was the Contender Series. I think he was supposed to compete on last year, right? So yeah, we thought we'd already said goodbye to Luke early last year, so we weren't expecting him, to fight towards the end of last year and again this year. But hopefully those issues will be sorted out. I know it's the last fight on his Cage Warriors contract now, so it's highly likely that this will 100% be the last Cage Warriors fight. And hopefully the UFC taking a close look at this performance and they can make something happen for him. And if they don't, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of other organizations willing to open that checkbook and make him a big offer. The UFC missed out on Paul Hughes. Are they going to want to miss out on another potentially world-class prospect? I mean, Hughes gambled on himself, right? He gambled on himself. He didn't want to sort of go in at that entry level of the UFC, and all of a sudden he's fighting for world titles and putting on incredible performances. And I think a lot of people would rate Luke Riley at the same sort of level, the same kind of ability, and able to climb that ladder just as quick. So, I'm hoping, I know Luke wants to be in the UFC. I'm hoping that they're going to be keeping a close eye on the fight this weekend. He's got a big test ahead of him and a rotten skill set for a striker like Luke Riley to go up against. But if he overcomes this test in the way he's beaten some of these other guys, then I don't think the UFC have a choice. They've got to go after this guy.
Yeah, and I think it's like the fact that, obviously he's coming from Next Gen, Paddy Pimbless gym and all, like, those guys go that route, it seems to be the way for them, and they're some follow the money, let's be honest, and they don't seem to be that, especially the younger up and coming guys in that gym. So I'd be surprised. But like, also, like, if the visa issue can't be sorted, there's only so long, I suppose, you can kind of wait around. So you wouldn't be surprised maybe if that didn't happen. But I'd say there'll be a lot of suitors looking for that signature. But I remember it was funny, actually. I was looking at a thing last night about Oban Elliott, and I remember when Oban was coming through, I did an interview with him, and I was like, we saw McGregor and Pimblett and the others coming through, and Ian Gary, and now he's the next guy. It feels at the moment like it is Luke Riley, kind of, who is that next guy who's on the verge of it. And if he didn't end up in the UFC, I suppose it'd be a shame. But I suppose maybe that's a chat for another day. But you mentioned Abasov. I went back and I watched a bit of him, and as you said, this guy is a very, very good fighter. Like, good jab, very good low kicks. He's a lovely counter left hand, kind of fights on his bike, but he also isn't afraid to kind of sit down and throw those punches. And he's good wrestling too. Goes for takedowns, and he's plenty of finishes in his ledger. 7 submissions and 1 knockout, and he's 9 wins. He's only been to a decision once in 11 fights, and there was a fighter recently I said the same thing about, but like, you watching his fights, you'll be shocked that he has only 1 knockout in 11 fights. He's such a good fighter on the feet, and maybe people thinking when it's a Luke Riley fight against a guy with only 1 knockout that maybe he's going to take him apart on the feet, and maybe he will. Let's see how it goes, but I don't think it'll be easy by any means. Like Luke, you can talk about Luke, Brad, here, but like, his improvements, I think he's always been very, very good, but I think his defensive improvements especially, but offensively as well, he's such an improved guy over the last couple of fights. And sometimes, when the UFC call is just about there, some people can kind of rest on their laurels and maybe not improve, and but that's not him. He definitely has done that. This is an intriguing matchup, and by no means a gimme fight for a guy who's on the verge, is it? This is an interesting battle.
It really isn't. I think, look, if you were to put Luke Riley up against a brawler or a boxer or a kickboxer style guy, he's probably going to run through them, right? Like, we've seen him do it before. We've seen him put a hurted on guys. We've seen him knock guys out with 1 shot. We've seen him break guys down. We know he can do that. would have been very easy for Luke to be like, find me a brawler, find me someone who's really rough and ready, who's going to stand toe to toe and bang it out with me, and I'll go and clean this guy out. He's accepted a fight against a guy who's got years of experience on the mats, loads of amateur wrestling, loads of sambo. Like Tario, like he gives off that vibe to me of a guy like we've seen him like striking in MMA and stuff, because he knows he's that level where he can beat the guys that he's been in there with before. And sometimes you see with guys like that, when they do step it up a level and they go against someone who's really dangerous, they go back to that core skill set that they've got, which is wrestling, and all of a sudden they're slinging guys all over the place and they're suffocating them. This is a dangerous fight for Luke Riley, because I think that's what Tyrell Abasov's going to do. I don't think he's going to want to go blow for blow with Luke Riley, and nor should he. So this is going to be really interesting, because if you look at what Riley's been saying about this fight, it's all been like, oh, so I can't fight wrestlers. Okay, let's find out. We'll see. I'll show you. So this is going to answer a lot of questions for both guys. And look, if this guy comes out here and submits Luke Riley, he's going to be in the UFC this year or next year. That's how that's going to go. You steal a guy like Luke Riley's thunder, you steal their place in the pecking order. For Luke Riley, one more big knockout, and like I say, the UFC have got to open that checkbook, or someone else is going to come in and get that signature. So a huge pivotal fight for both guys, and I think both guys probably at this stage in their career could have taken a much easier fight, and no one would have batted an eyelid. Instead, we're going to see a real scrap on Saturday night's main event.
Yeah, it's a really good fight, and as I said, it's one of those fights that if Luke Riley comes through it, I don't think there's any doubts at the moment anyway, but there's no doubts whatsoever, because it's such an interesting test. You mentioned Teddy Stringer a few minutes ago, and that's probably the standout fight to me and the rest of the weekend. He's fighting Antonio Sheldon, and watching a bit of Sheldon this morning, he's won his last 2 fights in a row. I watched that Mikhail Falk fight, and he did so well to win that fight. But for a guy who's like 11 fights into his career, okay, the record isn't amazing, but like the level of guys he's been in there with, Tom Mearns, Orlando Prince, Jordi Bacchus, Milia Had, to name but a few, it's really crazy. And it's, you mentioned about a test earlier on. Like, this is such a test for Stringer, who's obviously 4-0 at this stage of his career. Sheldon is so scrappy, and he wrestles an awful lot, and he's just I was watching some of it. I wrote out in my notes, a test of his mettle, and I think that's exactly what it will be, because like Stringer, jeez, he's so good, like amazing double legs and power on the feet, as well as, like, I wrote down sweet hands. Like, he only looks better with his BJJ maybe than he does with his hands, which is worrying for other people, considering the wrestling ability as well. How excited are you about Teddy Stringer, Brad, and how much of a test is this for the young guy?
I'm really excited about this fight from both sides. I've known Antonio a long time. Like, when I was first really starting commentating, he was doing things on the amateur circuit, which Teddy Stringer would then go on to do. Antonio was had a reputation as a bit of a belt collector, as a lightweight, up on that Northwest circuit. If you're looking back like 10, 12 years ago, when that Northwest scene was really like the pinnacle of amateur UK MMA, he won belts in FCC, other promotions. He's been training with Martin Stapleton for a long time, so he's got a good team around him. And then Teddy Stringer comes along a few years later and starts doing the same thing, picking belts up here, there, and everywhere. I guess the one thing that Teddy did, which Antonio didn't really have the opportunity to do, was the whole IMAF thing, because that came along later. And that's where Teddy kind of really established himself, doing all those international amateur tournaments. And then now they're meeting in the pro ranks. It's I guess Antonio's one generation back. You would probably say he's not been the most active guy since turning pro, but as he's proved in Cage Warriors, he can step in there with anyone and give him a scrap. The guys aren't finishing him in the first round. The guys who are getting the better of him, they're having to go to a decision with him, and he's making them earn that. So I think it's a great fight for Teddy at this stage in his career. As we said earlier, a bit of a frustrating year for him in terms of opponents not making it to the fight. And, seeing how frustrated he was last year, I can't remember where we were. I don't know if it was Manchester or Newcastle, and the opponent was out a couple of days before the fight, and he's already cutting weight. And then he goes over to America, and then the exact same thing happens. It's just not what you want a young guy of his age. Antonio Sheldon's not pulling out of a fight. He's not backing down. We know he's going to be there on fight night. We know he's going to be there on the scales. And yeah, I think this one's going to be an absolute banger. I think it's a real test for Teddy, and I think it's a chance for Antonio to show everyone, look, I'm not a stepping stone. I'm not a yardstick. I'm going to smash this kid's head in, and then you're going to give me the respect I deserve. And then he's 3 in a row, and he's looking at a big step up himself.
100%. You win that fight, and you're talking about title contention straight away. It reminds me of the next guy we're going to talk about, Adam Cullen. Like when Demetrio Grillian beat him, I suppose he was a good prospect himself, but it moves you forward. And it's a very interesting fight for Adam Cullen as well against Nonato Jr. Watching a bit of him, he's an absolute demon on the ground. Like his record, I'm just pulling it up here. He has 10 submission wins in 12 wins altogether in his career. And that's all you need to know about him, I suppose. Like, master the rear naked choke, gets you on the ground and just chokes you out of there. And look, Adam Cullen will have to be watching that. Like, he's never lost by submission in his career yet, and he's won plenty of fights by submission. But it's an interesting test, Lost 2 of his last 4, but beat Jan Blasco last time out with a lovely finish late in Manchester. Adam Cullen, at this stage of his career, he's still only 26, very, very young. As I mentioned, had a few setbacks. But I suppose it's important, Brad, to kind of get on a run again. If you are to go towards that title, if you are to go towards the UFC, you're going to have to be winning 3, 4, 5 fights in a row. And I suppose this is, after winning the last one, I suppose this is the start of the run, I suppose, for Adam Cullen, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Pardon me. I had a tough fight last time against Jan Blasco. Like, Jan's, one of those guys, a real records of a DJ's guy. Like, don't look at his record; he's absolutely nails. I remember talking to Adam after that fight, and he said it was like hitting a statue. Like the punches he was landing on that guy and the sound they were making, absolutely unreal. So it was a good test for Adam to overcome. Now he's got to build on that. As you say, he's fighting this time out, very different kind of opponent, a guy who's going to be hunting that neck, hunting that back the whole way through. It's a late notice fight for him. But it's one of those fights where he's going to have to mind his P's and Q's, and he can't afford to make a mistake and slip up here. Hearing that there's potentially going to be some pretty interesting opportunities for Adam Cullen in the summer. I'm sure Cage Warriors are going to be announcing our next kind of summer season in the coming weeks. Obviously, we still got a few shows to go yet. Manchester, London, Dublin, Glasgow, and then we're going to have a whole new bunch of shows to come out. And I know that the Cage Warriors brass are already kind of looking at potentially what's going to happen on the top of those cards and the main cards and the title fights and other exciting things. So hearing some interesting stuff for Adam Cullen. So I'm sure that will be at the back of his mind. He'll be focusing on getting a big win here at the weekend. He's always very well supported at the BEC Arena. It's obviously, 45 minutes away from where he lives, and the next gen lot always have a big crowd down for them. So looking forward to seeing Adam back in there. We know he's got the skills to finish guys quickly. If this one gets into the second round, how's he going to deal with that? These are the kind of questions that we need answering now.
You mentioned Sam Blasco there a minute ago. He's fighting O'Neal Brown this weekend as well. And, you talk about exciting things coming up for guys. Like, surely with a win here, O'Neal Brown is, if he's not the number one contender, he has to be very, very close at 1-3 in a row. And like the level of guys he's beaten as well, like Rafael Aronov and Kamara in there as well. I suppose the only issue is he's lost to James Sheehan, but that was a split decision. And if James Sheehan is still the champion by the time he comes back around, it's...
Well, here's the thing, Sean. So obviously Emil Brown won the prize fighter, right? So he was going to be the number one contender for James Sheehan, but he's dropped to lightweight. So this is 155 pounds now.
Oh, interesting.
So this is super interesting for me because I know that even before prize fighter, Emil was talking about dropping to 155 pounds. And my first instinct was, how? Like, the guy is an absolute tank. How's he knocking 15 pounds off here? But apparently there's been test cuts. He's been absolutely fine doing it. Felt really, really good. He's obviously dropped a bit of natural weight before he's doing the cut down to 155. But obviously, from Cage Warriors' point of view, it's difficult to give a big guy, a thick guy at 170 an immediate title shot before they can make the weight. So I very much kind of see this as like, welcome to 155 pounds for O'Neal Brown. And if he can get through this test with flying colors, if he looks good in there, I'd be very surprised if we don't see him in title contention before the end of the year.
They need someone for this weekend. Give it a bit of a test. You never know. Maybe we'll see. Brad, time is coming against us. Let me open up the floor to you for anyone else you want to mention from this weekend. There's a lot of good younger up and coming guys on these two cards as well as guys maybe who've been around for a while, like George Smith and Ali Salatani. Very, very interesting fight. tell us about some of the guys we should be interested. Shane Ingram is another guy I want to mention as well. I really like him. He's only 1-0, but young in his career. Let me give you the floor to tell us about some of the upcoming guys this weekend.
Yeah, Shea Ingram, unfortunately lost his opponent a couple of days ago, but Ian Dean swooped in, got that one sorted out. So Shea Ingram will still be on the card. We saw him last time against Mark Philippe and Gatchu, who's the Cage Warriors Academy amateur champion with 20 plus fights and a near perfect record. Just two guys making their debuts, and it was a fantastic fight. Shea Ingram coming out victorious there, looking to make it 2 in a row. Liam Malloy's back, who's another one of the next generation guys you might remember from a couple of years ago. Fought a bit sporadically since turning pro, but he's a next gen guy in the mold of Luke Riley. He's a really talented kickboxer. So very much looking forward to seeing what Liam can do. And we've got a huge clash of undefeated prospects on the card as well. Jack Humphreys from England taking on Nick Bukema from Holland. He is a student of Orlando Wilson Prince, who we saw last week. Super talented guy. Both these guys have a massive upside. Both very exciting to watch. And one of my picks on the card as well is the feature prelim. The Mighty Mole, Sam Kelly, taking on Richard Carlos. Richard Carlos, judo superstar, good striker as well. Sam Kelly just game for a scrap 365 days of the year. That one's going to be chaos. Going to be an interesting Saturday night in Manchester. Just to throw a little bit of spice into the mix as well. We're sponsored by a company called Fat Lads who do like competition prizes and stuff. And they are giving away a $4,000 judo watch to whoever gets the best knockout. Now, last time we did something like this, we had a crypto sponsor a few years back who were giving away some, I think it was like $2,000 worth of Ethereum or something.
I wonder how that works.
Well, from what I understand, the guys who won it cashed it out pretty quick, so it worked out quite well for them. But the point being, it was one of those double-header shows just after the pandemic. So there was like 22 fights, and I think there was 21 knockouts. Everyone wanted that bonus. So with a $4,000 watch up for grabs, I think these guys are going to be going nuts again. Thankfully, I don't have to pick who wins it this time, so I won't be getting constantly threatened by everyone who's just flatlined a dude in the cage and then coming over to shout at me about bonuses. But our benevolent sponsors will be making that decision. And someone gets to walk home with a nice new whistle.
I feel like they need to sponsor this show. Like I feel like it'd be here. I feel like that'd be a good fucking. I'll pick the winner.
They need to sponsor this commentator. My wrist is bare at the moment. I need a new watch.
Come on, guys.
My missus got me a watch winder for Christmas, and it has one more winding slot than I own watches. So if the sponsors are listening,
it is up. Sheehan show. / Cage Warriors preview shows that we need it. Brad, thank you very much for joining me. If you want to tune into Cage Warriors this weekend, UFC Fight Pass all around the world, so easy. March 14th, March 15th, over in Manchester. 2 fantastic cards, I'm sure, as always, with the best matchmaking, the best commentary, great production as well. The commentary was great last weekend. Actually, it was a stench.
It might not be. If my voice doesn't hold up, it might not be that good this weekend. No promises.
Oh yeah, the co-commentator will have to take up the sack audio, but sure will be great. Brad, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.